My name is Justin Dujardin. I'm one of the account executives here at Revelwood. I'm joined by my colleague, Haley Elliott, who will be showing you the overview demo of adaptive planning here in a few minutes. I want to take a few minutes to give you an idea of what to expect out of today's webinar. So firstly, in case you're not aware, some background on us here at Revelwood. We're a platinum business partner of Workday. And what that means is that we're part of an extremely select group of partners that help you evaluate and implement adaptive planning. I am aware that some of you may be here because you have an active initiative to get into a cloud FP&A solution. Some of you may be just here to learn, or you're curious. Either way, we would greatly appreciate your team taking 15 minutes with us in the next few days just to have a quick chat, to see what your current challenges are, if you have any feedback for us, and whether there's additional resources that we can follow up with that would be helpful to you. One important thing to know is that the demo today is meant to just give you a glimpse into what Workday Adaptive Planning can do. There's no way that we can cover everything in a 45-minute webinar because it's a really powerful solution with a lot of capabilities. So once again, I only have a few slides, but adaptive planning is a place where you can do all of your modeling, reporting, analytics, all in one place. So everything that you need is in one solution, and it acts as your central source of truth. And typically, we're talking with finance teams, but of course, we're pulling in general ledger data, but adaptive can connect to any data source that you need to, because at the end of the day, data is data, and you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place, into that central source of truth, to be able to model and report on that data with confidence. So this slide gives you an idea of many of the areas that you could, of the business, that you can plan and model using adaptive. And of course, it's not limited to the core FP&A. You can model really any operational area of the business that you want with adaptive. Now, adaptive has a really unique competitive differentiation, which is this elastic hypercube technology, which is a patented Workday technology. And the reason it's key is I'm not going to talk about technical specifics, but it makes the solution scalable with having an unlimited number of dimensions, an unlimited number of versions, scenarios, while keeping the solution also super easy to use and maintain. Everything lies in one database with this technology, as opposed to competitive solutions where a lot of them have multiple databases where data needs to be passed from one database to another, and there's coding and scripting that needs to be involved. The solution's intelligent, so when your system needs more processing power, the system expands only when it needs to. But once again, what's equally important is that you have this power without losing ease of use or maintainability. And hopefully you'll see in the demo today, as Haley is moving through, that everything is drag and drop functionality. So the end users can own this system without assistance from IT. And that really is why Adaptive has almost 6,000 customers globally. This is in all industries, and a 97% gross customer retention rate. So finally, some highlights on the adaptive planning side. I mentioned 6,000 plus customers, but this is backed by Workday, which is a $5+ billion company. And Workday was ranked #1 on Fortune's Future 50 list. They're constantly reinvesting into the product, which is why the product continuously improves. And it was ranked #2 on Forbes' World's Most Innovative. And that list includes companies like Google, Apple, and Tesla. So it's a really great accomplishment. At this point, I will pass it to Haley to dive into the demo.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin. I'm going to go ahead and pop up an agenda for today. Just as a quick intro to everybody, thanks for hopping on. My name is Haley Elliott, and I'm a pre-sales solutions consultant here at Revelwood. And just for background, I've been working with Adaptive for 2.5 years and actually spent the first year of that doing implementations of Adaptive for our clients. So that just means if you do have more technical questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And if we don't get to them today, we can absolutely follow up with you. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into, like I said, our agenda. So what you're seeing on the screen is kind of the flow of what we're going to go through today. We are going to start with just a basic lay of the land. So the foundational data model, which is really just a fancy way to say the backbone of Adaptive, or kind of the elements you're going to see on every screen. Then we'll move into scenario analysis. So I know that's a really hot topic for everyone right now. We're seeing inflation rates, all of that crazy stuff happening, and we need to be able to plan for it. So we're going to take a look at active dashboards and how Adaptive can help with that. Then we'll move into our financial statements. We are going to focus on the P&L today, but do just know that we typically build out a full 3 financial statement model with all of our implementations. So that'll be your P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow, whether it's indirect or direct. We are going to do a light touch on modeling. So this is where I anticipate a lot of questions and follow-up. We're going to focus on workforce. And then from there, we'll finish up on some more visualization. So ad hoc reporting and board reporting. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and pop into Adaptive. So this is my home screen when I sign into Adaptive. I say my home screen because this, like basically every other place in the system, can be customized on an end user by end user basis. So while I might want to see a summary like this, it's kind of top company metrics, that kind of thing. Someone else might want to see a working screen, company announcements, or just a help page. So keeping in mind that the entire Adaptive experience is meant to be tailored towards who's actually using it. So like I said, we're going to start with kind of the foundational parts of Adaptive, and that's going to be your level structure and your versions. So the level structure you can think of as your organizational structure. So legal entities, departments, cost centers. If you're project-based, you could put projects here, clinics here, practices. You kind of get the idea, whatever business units you typically plan by. A couple of things on levels. So one is that these are going to be your first line of security in Adaptive. So typically what you'll do is assign a user to kind of a level or a group of levels that they're supposed to have access to. And every dashboard, sheet, and report is going to be filtered to their individual level. So it's a really great way for those of you who are still in Excel and are probably maintaining separate templates for all of your departments. You have one dashboard, one template, and it's all filtered through the level structure. If any of you are high kind of M&A activity companies, the level structure is also quite easy to adjust. It's a plus button in the back end. So quite flexible. The other piece here is going to be versions. So with Adaptive, you do get an unlimited number of versions. You can load in as much data as you want with no additional cost. You'll notice some of these have a lock icon. That means it's a locked version. So if you have kind of that final approved or board approved budget, something along those lines, you can just lock that version down, and then end users will be able to view it, pull it into a report, but they won't be able to make any changes to that underlying data. So the idea there is you always have that historical reference point to go back to as you're moving through kind of your 12-month rolling forecast. Cool, so those are basics. One last point I'll say on basics is just navigation, and then we'll dive into dashboards. So navigation, the point here is your entire planning, reporting, and analytics processes in one screen, all the way from your working sheets and key drivers down to integration and just any support you might need around questions. So the idea there is that you shouldn't have to sign in anywhere else to be able to do any part of that planning, reporting, or analytics process. And we'll kind of walk through that concept today. But we'll dive in for now into the dashboards. So these are called active dashboards in Adaptive for a couple of reasons. The first is that any number you see on any dashboard or report or sheet for that matter in Adaptive can be clicked on and drilled into. So all of you want your data to do more than just sit there. You want to be able to ask questions about it, figure out the story behind it, that kind of thing. And so Adaptive is going to give you that option on dashboards in two different ways. So the first is this Explore Data. So if I click in there, I'm going to see our Cell Explorer, which is just going to give me a bunch of detail around where that data is coming from, if there's a calculation behind it, any dimensionality, and probably most importantly, there's an audit trail attached to every piece of data in Adaptive. And that just allows you to see what users have made changes to the underlying data, when they made the change, and what the change was. So a really great way is you do bring kind of department heads, practice leads into the system, making sure you're able to kind of track their work as they move through their budget. The other option here was our drill down path. So these are all of our dimensions on this data. The cool thing about drill down paths in Adaptive is that these are automatically generated. So if you look at a lot of other solutions on the market, you have to decide early on how you want to be able to drill into data and code that structure in. With Adaptive, if I add another dimension, it gets added to this list, and then I can start asking questions. Yeah, I see net revenue, but what markets am I selling in? From there, what products are selling in my markets? So you get the idea of this is how you kind of start to make your data tell you a story in a very easy way. So I can always go back to my original view. The last piece on active dashboards, which is probably the most critical, is going to be the ability to bring your planning models directly onto the dashboard. So if I come on down to a lower department, what you can do here is start to ask questions like, what if we exceed our targets by 15%? We have inflation go up another 1%, something like that. What you can actually do directly on the dashboard is say, hey, in this case, the units we're planning to sell, what happens if we sell 15% more? So I'm just going to make that change right here. Save it off. And what you're going to see is a little ... come up across each of these dials. That means they're refreshing live based on that change I just made. So the idea here is that Adaptive is one database. So when you make changes to a model, that's going to update in every report or dashboard it's referenced. You don't have to click a button to sync things up. Adaptive is going to keep everything synced up for you. You can create snapshot schedules for these and just have them automatically sent to individuals on a daily, weekly, or monthly cadence. And then in terms of actually building them out, this will be true for everything in Adaptive pretty much. It's just click and drag. So you can see I came into the editing menu. I have all of these nice charts over here, most of the ones that you're probably using for key KPIs. And I can just go ahead and drag any chart that I want onto my dashboard. And I have access to every single data point in Adaptive. So yes, we can automate your GL balances and transactions, but we can also automate things like operational data, or you can start to compare your kind of budgeted workforce details against financial metrics. So a lot of flexibility in terms of reporting and what type of data you have available to work with. Cool. So moving on from dashboards, we're going to chat a little bit about our sheets and financial statements. So sheets, anytime I say that, you can think working screens, the workbooks a lot of y'all are kind of used to working in, or models. I'll kind of use those terms interchangeably. So we're going to come into our P&L and kind of talk a little bit about what we're about to see on the screen here. So first of all, you see green numbers and black numbers. Green numbers are my actual data, so usually coming in from your ERP. And again, we can connect to any ERP you may have. And then black data is our budget data, and that's nicely coordinated to versions if you're just getting into the system for the first time and are trying to figure out what things mean. So to get a better look at kind of what's going on behind the scenes here, I'm going to come down to one of our departments. And again, you can see I was just on a consolidated financial statement. Now I'm down on a departmental P&L. So in terms of what's happening here, you see blue carrots and red carrots on some of these cells. Red carrots just means there was a note left when someone was entering their budget. All you have to do to leave a note is right click, add a note. Those notes, we'll see this later. They'll aggregate at the bottom of reports as well, so that you don't have to kind of go through tab by tab, something like that, to actually see everyone's comments. The other item that you see here is just that little blue carrot, and that means this is a calculated field. So calculations in Adaptive, again, are not code-based. It's pretty straightforward syntax. If you're familiar with Excel, you are going to be perfectly fine. So what's cool about the formulas in Adaptive is they're much more informative than the like A2 times B360 in a cell or in a workbook that you don't even have anymore. So you can see that formula sitting right up here. We have our FTE account coming straight from our personnel model, multiplied by one of those assumptions. So if I come into one of those assumption sheets and change this driver, it's actually going to update everywhere that value is referenced, because formulas in Adaptive are account-based. It's all point and click, pretty easy to learn, and just adding on to kind of ease of use. If any of you are Excel diehards, I know there are a lot of us, Adaptive does have a lot of Excel shortcuts, so that actually navigating through these sheets, you can not use your mouse and keep that kind of consistency in terms of user interface. The last 2 points I'll make here, one is if you ever want to be able to make changes, add things like graphs, compare versions, you can do that directly on the model, and it's just going to impact your view. And then Adaptive has also introduced some machine learning. So one example of that is this anomaly detection, and basically it'll go through and highlight everywhere in your budget that's outside of what you would expect based on the past 2 years of actuals. From here, like I mentioned, Adaptive is about making your data tell stories and making you more efficient. So if you ever want to know why a number looks like it does, or kind of figure out what's underlying that data, you can just right click, explore cell. And this is going to give me that explore cell viewer, but I'm going to take it a step further and actually get from my financial statements back into the actual input sheet that's generating it. So a couple of notes here. One, this row detail that you're seeing can be locked down. I know personnel detail is a very sensitive kind of topic. And so it's just a checkbox permission. If someone doesn't have salary detail permission, then they'll only see this top kind of summary of their employee burden and not these underlying details on an individual basis. But again, from that line on our income statement, we're actually going to move into our workforce planning. So this is one of our models or sheets. It's just one of our kind of more standard workforce planning sheets based on individuals. So this is called a modeled sheet. And basically that just means you can pull whatever columns you want onto this sheet. This really highlights that elastic hypercube technology that Justin was talking about earlier, in that you are choosing what intersections you want to plan at, and that's the only thing that's being calculated here. The cool thing about Adaptive on modeling is that when 2 years from now your business model changes, Adaptive models can also be easily updated. I've added in a couple of columns recently here. And this demo instance has been around for a while. So the idea there is you do not have to do a rip and replace every single time you add a new revenue stream. You want to add something else to your model, something along those lines. In terms of what's happening here, you'll see a couple drop downs. So these are dimensions, and they're just calling back to the kind of key drivers in the assumption sheets that I kind of briefly mentioned when I went over navigation. And so specifically here, we're looking at residents for tax. And in this case, if I select New York, it's going to pull all of those tax rates. So just one example of kind of assumptions and dimensions and action. You'll also notice that we have an individual split here. So Will spends some of his time working in the Sales South department, some in Sales North. And this is really just highlighting the ability to allocate employees across different departments, different projects. If you do internal R&D, if you're doing services projects, there are a bunch of different use cases for this, but the idea is Adaptive will automatically allocate this individual's expenses across those levels or dimensions. If you want to get really sophisticated with this, like we said, Adaptive data agnostic, so we can go as far as bringing in kind of actual hours spent in departments and calculate this for you. So just one example, anything you're seeing can be calculated as well. Speaking of calculations, if you come into the row details of any of these rows, you're actually going to see their employee burden calculations. These are all configurable. We'll basically sit down with you and figure out what metrics are most valuable for you to measure. But the one I really like to highlight here is you'll see this tax for Maddie drops off once she hits her maximum. So Adaptive has the financial intelligence to know, hey, this person or this number has hit this ceiling that was set. Go ahead and cut that off until the next fiscal year. Okay. If you ever want to kind of plan for open headcount, something like that, you can also just come in, add rows. If you're hiring a similar position, copy the row. And as soon as I save this off, it's going to be reflected in my forecast on my P&L. You can, of course, bring in like approvals and rejections and all that, but just keeping in mind single database, as I make a change in my models, that's going to update my actual top line financials. But that was a quick overview of Workforce. From here, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the last two types of reporting in Adaptive. So the first is going to be ad hoc reports. So these reports are pretty easy to build out. I will go into the back end of them, but the idea here is when you have kind of a quick budget versus actuals that you need to do, you want to do a variance analysis, make sure that actuals were loaded correctly, something like that. That's when you would typically utilize one of these reports. So we'll kind of walk through what's happening on the screen here. If I open up footnotes, you'll see notes from multiple different departments. And if you remember back to a little bit ago when we looked at the P&L, these are all of those red caret comments. So again, you're not having to go through and ping everybody, hey, why is this number like this? Why did you put this in? They're actually able to leave notes, and that's all going to consolidate for you right on a report. In terms of what you can actually do here, so you can still click into any of these numbers and figure out where they're being generated. So again, that's consistent with every data point you see, whether it's on a dashboard, a sheet, or a report. And so in this case, we can see there's a pretty wild variance in one of our T&E accounts between what actually happened and what we thought was going to happen. So if I come in and just click into our actuals, I'm going to have the option to drill all the way into transactional detail. So this is usually very valuable for our clients in that, one, you're not having to ping accounting every time actuals look a little bit off to figure out, hey, why was this higher? What changed? What came in that was different? And two, it's all in one platform. So I don't need to sign back into my ERP to be able to get this level of detail. You can add in whatever columns you want. So vendor, invoice number, project ID, whatever is going to be most valuable for you to see at the transactional detail level. The other piece on these types of reports is going to be the ability to actually pivot them. So if I click on any of these accounts running down the side, you're going to see that same drill down path. So in this case, if I want to look at my salary and wages by function, so a slightly different alternative hierarchy of my normal reporting structure, you can see I've completely pivoted this report to an entirely new view in just a click. So we're looking at my salary and wages by S&M, R&D, G&A. You can download these as Excel and our PDF if you want to distribute them at all. And in terms of building these out, again, drag and drop. All of these interfaces are going to look pretty similar. And so you can see all of your elements available in Adaptive right here in the reporting window. And then if you want to add something like an operational metric, workforce, another GL account, all you have to do is click and drag it onto the report. Variance calculations are also already in here for you to just grab and drag. So it's a very dynamic type of reporting that only takes a minute or two to set up. Okay, cool. So that's ad hoc reporting. We are going to take a quick look at the last type of reporting in Adaptive, which is Office Connect. But real quick, this is one of the probably most popular types of reports that we see. Is just the full 3 financial statement models stacked on top of each other, just as another example of what you can do with this type of reporting. I can see a complete summary of income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, and any sort of key financial metrics. So kind of proving out the concept that yes, you can have all of your financial data, which is fantastic, especially if you're trying to accelerate the close process. But you can also start to get into more operational detail or operational metrics as well, right on the same report. Cool. So in terms of Office Connect is Adaptive's plugin to the Microsoft Office 365 suite. So that's going to be PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. We're going to focus on Excel today. The main use case for Office Connect is going to be for those more formatted board reports, investor reports, if you're PE-backed, kind of reports for your PE ownership, something along those lines that the format doesn't necessarily change as much, but there are very specific formatting requirements. So a couple of things here. You do maintain full Excel functionality, which means if you already have a report like this stood up, you can actually just overlay Office Connect on top of it, drag your accounts directly onto your existing report, and make it dynamic. And I'll kind of show you how that works. If I highlight linked cells, you're going to see blue cells and green cells. So blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive. And to prove that out, if I hit Explore Cell and actually log into my credentials to make sure I'm not accessing info I shouldn't be, this is going to take me back into Adaptive. So it's going to open up that Cell Explorer that you've seen me drill into a few times. And even from my Excel report, I'm actually able to see the underlying details again, audit trail, get back to the sheets that are generating that final number. Green cells are going to be our dynamic labels. So when I try to create my April board report in a minute, that'll actually update for me as well. In terms of building these, also drag and drop. Hopefully this pane over here looks pretty similar to the web reporting we just saw earlier. But the idea here is if I come into accounts and want to add a new set of accounts to my report or want to connect an existing report I have to Office Connect, I can come on, click and drag. We're going to see those cells highlight blue. They're now connected to Adaptive. So the next step here, if I need to kind of spin up a report like this for next month real quick, is just going to be to come up to Workbook Properties, roll our report date forward to the date that I actually want to report on, April, and refresh. So you're going to see 2 things happen. One, all of my time strata kind of labels updated. And then 2, all of those new accounts that I pulled in also filled in. So pretty easy to modify these types of reports as kind of you get additional requests, anything like that. From the report as well, if you want more detail without needing to drill back into Adaptive, you can just expand one of these accounts, and we're actually going to see the GL detail underneath that account. Another cool thing here, if you added another GL account, let's say 6140, next time I refresh this report, it's going to open up another line below this and automatically populate that account. So you do not have to worry about kind of remembering, oh, we added 6 GL accounts, we added a new department, something like that. Adaptive is going to keep that in sync for you. The last piece here, before I kind of check for questions and then pass it back to Justin, is just going to be on repeating reports. So if you're ever asked to create these types of reports. So let's say a formatted P&L for departments or practices, something like that. All you need to do is come into repeating reports, select levels. I'm going to pick just a couple of my sales departments in this case. Create. And what you're going to see here is 3 new tabs at the bottom. So I'm now going to have a formatted East, South, North, and total company report. So again, quite easy to kind of get this type of detailed reporting on a departmental basis, on a product level basis, anything along those lines. It does look like all of our questions were answered. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to Justin at this time. Thank y'all.
Sounds good. Thank you, Haley. And yeah, I'd like to emphasize that we can certainly dive deeper into follow-up questions on a follow-up call. We do encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you are there, you can visit our Knowledge Center. We offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process, FP&A, technical tips on adaptive, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips about all business aspects of your FP&A model. And so we really appreciate you all attending and spending the time with us. Once again, either myself or one of my colleagues will be reaching out for hopefully a 15-minute follow-up call with you. We hope that you got a lot out of this session, whatever your goal was, but hopefully you will take the time to share your feedback. We greatly appreciate it in advance. Please let us know how else we can help, and we look forward to talking to you soon.